Kumar Pushpak will not be with us. We're here speaking with Mark Gorkin. Today, Mark, it is a pleasure to see you again. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm feeling especially good. My
Ah,
treatments have ended,
wow,
and
ring the bell, ring the bell.
really, yeah. So, no, I'm just ready to move on with new things.
Yes. You know what? It's strange because this is a really nice time for you, and there's a sense that although we have a huge amount of work in front of us, there's a sense that a lot of us are feeling that same way. This is an entirely new world for all of us. It's going to be different. And yet we're all moving forward. Isn't that great? So, what were we going to be talking about today? We had a great conversation last week, didn't we? We
Yes,
were
and
we were talking about um, disconnection and isolation. And we were just getting to the meat of it. We were just talking about the fact that you were looking at a set of tools and a set of behaviors that individuals and workers and leaders can focus on. And could we bring it back to what we were discussing there? I know we were just getting back into the path that we want to get through away from cabin fever as well as getting into all in this together.
let me maybe summarize. Really, the inspiration for me for this idea was certainly the COVID, and when I read that um, teleworkers from a various research studies, you know, companies were more and more moving into this distance working situation. You know, only having you know absolutely essential personnel come into work in the workplace in the office, and some not having anyone come in. Um, but one of the consequences of all this teleworking was a sense of isolation. We were hearing a lot about how people are being as productive or even more productive, and perhaps we were also hearing about some of the challenges of people working at home and also having to school their kids. So it wasn't all wine and roses. However, one clear challenge was that people were starting after time over time to feel isolated, and as you said, some cabin fever, some feeling, I miss my colleagues, I miss, being able to just, kind of drop in on somebody's cubicle or office, or you know that human interaction, that what I would call the human touch. High tech is great, but it's got to be integrated with human touch. We're finding out, we're not AI entities. We're
Right.
still human beings dealing in an AI world, perhaps.
Let's let's compare that to what I was coming from. Here I was, one of those horrible people who is a bean counter. I have like 2 degrees in business on top of technology. And um, I'd been reading all these business experts saying, you know, all of these jobs are going to go away. All of these pull the switch and pull the lever jobs that you get your gold watch after 35 years are going to be non-existent. Corporations are and businesses are not going to last the full length of a human life. So we have to consciously reinvent ourselves. We have to run ourselves like corporations. And that discussion was starting back in 1970s and 80s and into the 90s. And at that time they were saying you have to formally take control of your corporation and nobody will be watching over you. You have to do it or it's not going to happen. And it was like a huge thing on the shoulder, and it created a sense of isolation. And then you have the fact that you have shareholder supremacy inside of corporations, where the only way you can make a lot of money inside of a corporation is embrace technology and get rid of the skilled workers quickly. And the shareholders are driving it like crazy. And so in 2004, 5,000 out of 80,000 people in my corporation were wiped out overnight. They were gone, and it was like they were never there. And these were not like janitors and cafeteria people. These were middle management, the people who actually made sure that the managers of the workers were going away. Now, it's great in some ways, but in other ways, these people who had real jobs, who were doing real things, were out in the middle of nothing. So this is not a new thing, but what happened was that whole thing that was happening in 2003 through 2008 was all of a sudden on the world stage here, early here. And I was like taking notes and watching. And I've been an isolated worker since 2013. And so I knew what was going to be going on, but I was astounded in one way: the resilience of people to be able to turn on a dime overnight. I was fascinated by the fact that people have a negative sense of their capabilities and the ability to handle it, and they did it. But the problem was then, of course, month after month after month doing it, it wears them down. And you and I have talked about that fact.
And that's where I would like to, I mean, I think it's great that I love this, sort of two-stream track. I'm more on a micro level, and you're looking at it both on a macro and micro level. The micro, from that human touch perspective, is the effects that this ongoing sense of working at home, relatively alone, feeling isolated. One, we know that over time is going to impact your state of concentration, focus, energy, enthusiasm, can spin off into, group morale issues, lack of just the lack of connection. So think about it. It's almost like, when they say maybe we have to be plugged into a power source,
right,
an energy source. And, working alone, sometimes we're losing that group, or at least it's attenuated, the group and company, power station. We're not plugged in the same way.
Oh, yeah. And
with that in mind, I realized, and what I understand about dealing with crises, I taught crisis intervention for 10 years at Tulane University, and was trained originally as a therapist in crisis intervention, brief treatment, that I knew this COVID experience was impacting people's emotions and psyches on multiple levels that nobody's trained them to understand. This is
this is totally new territory for most.
So, and now we're seeing how the stress level goes up, and then if you have the COVID experience, the percentage of mental health illness during and after the experience is increasing. So this whole, and even if you haven't had it, once you start knowing people that have had the illness or have died from COVID, suddenly you're feeling a little bit more vulnerable. So it's not only isolation, it's, a greater awareness that, this is more real than we have the human mind in some ways is good, has a way of kind of pushing things aside. A trauma, yeah, that's bad, but it's not on my doorstep, and But now this is starting after a long enough time. It's getting on people's doorstep. So there are a lot of factors creating this, a lot of streams converging into this river of uncertainty and vulnerability. And so what are we going to do about that? There has to be a way of helping both the individual and the group in an organization begin to talk about this experience, not only how it's impacting us on in terms of work relations, work productivity. People are having problems getting up in the morning, problems structuring their day, problems, or some people are so, deal with their anxiety that they become so kind of rigidly connected to the computer that, they don't know how to take a break. They don't know how to break away. They get caught up in what you call that, either burnout or cabin fever.
Right.
So we need an experience that can bring out that inner resilience. You're absolutely right, Tim. We all have that potential for resilience. How do we now? Some people, maybe like yourself, who are a little more introverts and knowledge and writing as almost like journaling, it becomes a stress a builder of emotional muscles. I'll call it stress resilience. But not everybody's sort of programmed that way. And we all at some point, just as I know, when you and I and Kumar have these conversations, we're not just sharing ideas, we're connecting with each other on an emotional level. And that's what people are needing. Not only just to talk about their stress or their challenges of organizing their day, but how do they share some exciting ideas? How do they create that creative connection with partners? So this is what I'm thinking. I was coming up with the idea that there needs to be a structure that both, frees stress resilience and frees creative partnering.
Uh-huh.
Even if you're in a long, distance working situation. And then over since the COVID, but even really before, I've been using Zoom to run a variety of groups. Just as you've been using it to, run classrooms. And it dawned on me that, the experience that I've been able to sort of facilitate, orchestrate with a variety of people, from sort of Unitarian intellectuals to street smart, folks in DC, it's really been a rich, enriching experience, both to improve, that sense of confidence and control and resilience, but also to create this social bond. And as you and I talked, I came up with this concept of, that there's no I in team, but you know what? There are really two I's in winning.
Yes.
As these eyes can see, winning teams blend individual capability, individual creativity, and intimate communication and interactive community. And so that's what this whole program in my mind started kind of coming into focus. And then talking with you and Kumar has helped, sort of broaden the focus and sharpen the focus. And so that how do we create this online structure, this distance structure that really gives people a chance to share, to learn from each other, to support each other, to inspire one another, and to, build up this sense of community. So that's it in a nutshell.
A lot of things fired off in my head while you were talking. Let me go through them really quickly, and
Sure.
we'll come back to what you were talking about. Number one, I got this image when you were talking about being in isolation. I got this image of ships, individual ships that don't usually go out into the ocean, but they stay near shore, and they don't have any anchors. And when you don't have any anchors as a ship, the best thing you can do is lash yourself to another ship real tightly. And when you have enough ships, you have a foundation. But the problem is, when you start getting that big, you have to be careful about the shore itself, because the shore itself gets a little iffy also, and you almost are stronger being out in the middle of the ocean lashed to each other than being lashed to each other near the shore, which is really strange. And I found that with my isolation as an individual. In the corporate life, we were really close to the shore. But when I was working as an entrepreneur and a thought leader, all of a sudden I had deeper, longer, and broader and more connected relationships with my mentors and my mentees. And this has continued. I don't just rely on the people I go to, to talk me down or to ask for information. I rely on the people who come to me. That's how I recharge. I recharge almost better when people call me up and say, "Hey, Tim, I have a problem." That's relevance. All of a sudden, I matter. If I wasn't here, I wouldn't be helping people. And that's the connection. That's the creation of the connection. A second thing is the fact that if you are not a healthy individual, you can't help a group be healthy. And a leader knows this. I walk into my classes between 30 and 175 people. And each one of those class, every single day, these people are anxious, scared, angry. They're bouncing off the walls because of what the television is yelling at them. They don't know what to do next. And I have 5 minutes to let them decompress and bring them into an orderly group. And I've discovered that if you establish ground rules strongly right off the bat, and you create this structure, and if you allow people to be crazy a little bit, people to speak up, and people say you're wrong, and have a little bit of argument, my classes are no longer clean and orderly. It's no longer a lecture series, but it's human. It's messy. It's no longer sitting in an auditorium. It's down on a martial arts mat where people are able to express their emotions, be frustrated, even though they don't know why they're frustrated, they're able to express it. And it's a beautiful mixture. And if a leader is tuned in to the dynamics and the energy and the context of the people, they can actually weave this in to a very, very immersive experience. This is how everybody's asking, how do I make Zoom better? Allow people to be messy and unorderly, allow them to shout, allow them to do this within certain ground rules, and people will feel safe. They'll have a little bit of more control, and they feel like they're getting something out of it. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah. No. And I loved your analogy. The idea is that sometimes you have to leave the shore, get into the middle of the ocean, and you can still build some, connections with fellow ships, other ships in that ocean, and that connection, creates, you know, more solidarity and security.
And what's weird is there's been a shift for me over these last 10 years. And I'm still trying to figure this out. Maybe we can talk about this in the future. The risk for me is no longer other people. The risk for me is no longer other corporations. Our corporations be down there. The risk now is am I willing to let my boundaries down? Am I willing to expose my soft parts to people I usually wouldn't? This is actually what I found is the big connecting piece. That's the big piece. It's self-exploration.
And this is where I think you're absolutely right about the importance of ground rules in this kind of social experiment. You know, because what I'm really, what I'm talking about is as you're doing it in a classroom setting. I'm talking about this in a webinar support group setting. Maybe with a maximum of 12 or 15 people, probably closer to 12. So it's a more intimate setting, and the goal is to create some real intimacy. That is to talk about the things that, normally we don't like to acknowledge. Hey, I'm really having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. Or I just, can't seem to sit at my desk for more than 10 minutes before I jump up and, have to be looking at my phone, or I, have to put on the TV, or whatever it is. People are going to have to decide, are you ready to talk about yourself and your experience at home with work and family on a more honest, authentic, vulnerable level? And you don't just send people out there. Okay, you have to have some ground rules, and they have to feel there's a leader, there's a Tim running this class that they
Yes.
trust.
Yes, that we're hardwired for that. We are hardwired to either find a leader or be a leader. And the weird thing is, these guys like Deming and Drucker was saying, guys, it doesn't work like that anymore. This was back in the 90s and the early 2000s. We got to be all leaders. The janitor has to be a leader. The lunch lady has to be a leader. We have to step up and we have to be responsible. Responsible, the very word means step up. Nobody else is stepping up. We get to. Now, there's a funny thing that I learned in conflict management. One of the tools in conflict management that I observed was smoothing. Smoothing is a very weird thing, and I love to talk about it because it's when you have great contention in a group or you have isolation in a group. How do you actually get every individual to start thinking as a group, like in a book club? Let's say that you've decided you want to start a group to help a bunch of friends that you're all isolating. You want to do it. How do you start creating that sense of intimacy and that ability to let your guard down? And smoothing in conflict management says all you have to do is find one thing that everybody has in common, and they start thinking in unity. And it's silly. It could be a flavor of pizza. It could be a flavor of ice cream. But if they all have one thing in common, we used to do this with icebreakers. But if we can actually do it, and it's not done by following an agenda. It's done by creating little pockets of casual, informal things. My mentor in consulting was brilliant. He said back before we had conferences, he said the first thing you should do whenever you start a class that's remote or you start a conference call, look out the window and tell everybody what the weather's like because it actually connects them to something that's real. It gives them almost a physical sense and an emotional sense of I am part of something that's real. And that seems to work really well with me as well, and it carries with me today. And it's not something that is common to one culture. This is wired into who we are. It's a wonderful day. It's the weather's cool. There's a little bit of breeze going out, and I see a roadrunner out in my driveway. These tiny little conversations I have all of a sudden turn my meetings into a sharing environment.
And then you could see how it's not such a great leap to go from, oh, you mean I'm not the only one struggling, with setting a structure for myself in the morning? Suddenly other people can now say, hey, yeah, I'm having that problem also. And suddenly you're no longer alone. So one can be, or one can be in solitude, to use your word, but don't have to feel alone and isolated, especially when you're not the only weird oddball that's having a hard time. That
Yes.
it's a very normative kind of thing. And at the same time, we know groups that go on for a while go through stages. The norming, the forming. There's the stage of forming. You're coming together initially. You start developing some norms, but guess what? Norms don't work for everyone all the time. There are going to be some people that are going to say, hey, wait, this is stifling me too much. Or, I'm just a contrarian. And so there has to be a little bit of storming. You got forming, you got norming, you got storming. And you can ebb and flow after the storming. Okay, maybe we need to make some new norms to, come up with procedures and processes that work better for this particular group with these particular individuals. Because we don't want to, that's the IC2 concept, individual creativity and interactive community. That really, and the bridge is that intimate communication. So
Right.
we want to find that ebb and flow, that yin yang between the individual drives and desires and the community greater goals and aspirations. And so so the four stages have been forming, norming, storming, and ultimately performing.
And performing is really weird. I found it weird. It's almost like being a football coach. I have a very English wife, and so when I say football, I mean soccer.
Okay.
It when you watch a coach teaching kids, they say, "Okay, let's work on skills, and we're going to drill, 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 drill." And that's working with the individual, and that's the forming, and that's the storming, because the kids are
And the,
going to be
and the
comparing
norming,
each
right?
other.
Yeah.
And then the coach says, okay, it's time to play positions. And if a leader really is keyed into this, they can actually take advantage of this. This isn't something that we have to put into people as leaders, and managers. We don't teach people how to be in class like this. This is hardwired into us. And the ability to actually have people get comfortable with their roles, playing their positions, this is where they build trust to each other. It's that the repeated experience over and over and over and over and over that creates that trust. And that's where you have trust that allows you to let your guard down.
And I would add to that is, what's the quality of the communication as this process is unfolding.
Another one of those C's, exactly.
And the more honest, real, I can be vulnerable. I can acknowledge that, yeah, maybe I made a mistake. I don't have to put on hey, that wasn't my problem. I don't have to get defensive. The more we can, especially as a leader, but, as you said, everyone can be a leader in a group. So the more that we can have that kind of authentic You know, this is me. I'm that make it real conversation with people where we don't pull rank on people and then, sort of intimidate them. So you really never find out what's going on in the trenches. They're just giving you the information they think you want to hear.
Right. And the problem is this, what we're talking about has been taught in school, in business school for generations. I go like this all the time, and I think about, I'm it just saddens me. But then
So,
I
so let me ask,
realize
why, if it's been taught for generations, why doesn't the learning seem to stick?
I have some opinions.
Okay, good.
Okay. Number one, I have observed inside of business that management as a skill has to be taught face to face. It's something that's learned because management is 70 to 90% leadership and relationship. It's something that you have to learn. And you have to have good mentors around you. And the fact that we have pared down our corporations to lean, 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 lean over 2 decades, we don't have time to teach. And so we throw people into these management positions, and they're, you know, bless them. They're doing wonderful work, but they're doing work without the skills and without the support that they should have. And when I talked about the 5,000 people being cut from companies, this is okay. Think about a family. The middle management of the family is mom. Dad is sitting up in the CEO's office, and mom's
And
the
even
one.
that's changing now.
Right. And mom is the one that makes sure that everybody's shoes is tied, everybody brushes their teeth. And if you kick mom out of the house, dad's running the place, but dad has to be making dad decisions, and there's nobody to be mom. And without leadership, you have people jumping in there, to just keep the business running, and they're doing the best they can without skills and without support, and they're making mistakes, and they're frustrated, and they're angry, and they're afraid to show that they're making mistakes because you're never taught that it's all right to make mistakes as long as you clean up after yourself. And so it's very difficult. I found it's very difficult in management training to get people over this and to let their guard down and say, if you don't demonstrate that you make mistakes, if you don't demonstrate that I'm only a human being and we all need to decompress, you're never going to have the example that you set for others, and you're never going to be able to mend yourself and recharge yourself. And this is the sad thing right now. So many people are in leadership positions, and they're isolated and frustrated and angry and depressed, and they're scared. The imposter syndrome, that's why imposter syndrome is talked about so much on the television, because we're not trained, we don't have the experience, and we don't feel like anybody has our back.
Let me just jump in here because I think this is so relevant to the concept that I'm carving out just a slice of this whole pie that we're talking about. But the slice being, how do how do companies connect with and relate to long distance workers, and even now you could say workers that are in the office that are trying to figure out what's a safe way of relating to each other in this COVID time, but especially those quote unquote isolated, not feeling connected workers who are going through a crisis that is stirring up memories and emotions and feelings from previous crises in their lives or previous, difficult times. So you have a much more vulnerable person, you know, at home trying to connect with his or her colleagues And at the best of times, that would be difficult for a manager or a supervisor to, how do I connect and coordinate, all these diverse people or distant people. But now you've got vulnerable people, vulnerable in a way that management certainly hasn't been taught how to provide counseling, if not therapy like skills to, to the people that I'm coordinating. Normally we would send them to an employee assistance program counselor, or unfortunately some would just get fired or whatever, or as it often happens, we'll just overlook them. As long as they do their work, I don't worry if they go around with an angry attitude that's, intimidating other people on the team. They're productive. That's all I care about. All these things ultimately are going to, erode morale and motivation in your group. And so this is just to finish this point, Tim, so this is where we need these groups to be facilitated by an uncommon individual who has skills in how do you use this new technology, this new media to connect with people, not just to, bore them to death with, turn people on Zoom into zombies. How do we prevent that? And who have an understanding of crisis, an understanding of, some of the challenges and being more of a self-initiator when you're not used to that, when you're used to coming to work and having that structure kind of motivates you. Now you've got to be more, in a way, entrepreneurial. How do you create open and honest communication? How do, most of us grew up in families where, the motto is don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Or a lot of people grew up in families. And suddenly I've got to be, I'm supposed to talk openly and honestly about that I'm having some troubles and share that with my colleagues. Boy, that's a big leap.
Yes.
So you need a facilitator who has a whole very complex skill set to be able to create the structure and trust to help these people gradually open up and share with one another in a more honest way, a little more vulnerable, so that we can really create some healing synergy, some new sense of potential, some creative connections, maybe even create, some of the groups can become partners with each other and developing new ideas. There's a lot of potential, but we need the right setting and leadership, facilitatorship to make this happen.
Yes. And it's really strange, but all of the pieces to this solution are here. You have the 2 I's and the 2 C's. Let's talk about that again. Can you go through them once again?
Sure. On one level, it's basic. What are the individual capabilities of the individual? And then let's talk about what is the individual creativity. What, we really want people that are not just capable, but what's your passion? What gives meaning? What about this work sets you, your spirit flying a little bit? Or can we find something that really helps you bring out your uniqueness in this situation, so we're getting a perspective that no one else can bring? So how do we get that individual creativity going? And then if we just had everybody being their own little individual thing and running off and doing, we're squandering that ability then to how do we bring these people together so that they can challenge one another, they can support one another, they can jazz riff with one another and create unique sounds and unique experiences that are so much greater than just the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But you need both. You need individuals that challenge the conventions of the group, of the organization, because groups and organizations get comfortable after a while. And we stay with things that work. Oh yeah, we've always done it this way. It's good enough. No, the individual says, wait a second. I think there's something better here. And I don't want to be, kind of stifled in that same group norm. And so the individual, if the group is smart, they let the individual challenge themselves. So they get uncomfortable. They have to break up the puzzle again and hopefully put the pieces together in a richer way than before.
Yeah. So what we've been talking about is a new way that we need to step up and work as a group. We have to not just ignore or try to push conflict outside the door. We need to see conflict as a guidepost and as a bright neon arrow saying, here's opportunity if you know how to work with it within rules. And then we have leadership. You have to look at leadership totally differently. You can't be a leader like having a clipboard in your hands and saying, you did it in 17 seconds today. What's the matter? You did it in 15 seconds last week. And that's needed inside companies. You really do need this. But at the same time, you need to also be able, as a real leader, you have to be able to step back and say, okay, you made a scuff mark on the computer, or you spilled your coffee on the carpet. That's going to be a human being. Clean it up and do it quickly. And I'm not going to get on you, because if I get on you, it's going to ruin my day. It's going to ruin your day, and it's going to get in the way of productivity. It's like, okay, instead of me having to control you, all of a sudden, Mark, you're saying the best way is I need to control myself. And then then the job that you have is no longer doing this. Your job is clearing everything out of the way for everybody else so they can get their work done in a safe, controlled environment. That we call that servant leadership. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and the other thing is, when you don't get on the person's case, if they spill the coffee and they realize, yeah, that was on me, I'm going to get at it, clean it up, and then you don't have to worry, will I make a mistake every time? You can take risks, you can experiment, you can explore. But if people are so afraid that if they do something wrong, they're going to get, smashed down, who's going to be really try to be creative? No, I'm just going to do what I have to do to get out of here after 5 o'clock. So it's you're really sending a very powerful message when you allow people to be human, not robots.
And yeah, and what's awesome is there's 2 laws that kick in. Number 1, I don't have to keep everything in my head. I don't have to be perfect. Number 2, people are going to start getting as good as me at my work, which means I can focus as a leader on moving up too. I no longer have to be stuck. I can stop thinking as a middle manager or first level manager. I can start thinking as an executive. I can start being more strategic instead of being in crisis management. They're doing the crisis, they're having fun with that, and they're doing it well, and I can teach them crisis management better than anybody else. But at the same time, I can touch, and my influence in the strategy and my influence how to treat people and how to manage people can be spread out further and further. And so you're right. It's the individual and the group. It's the 2 I's and the 2 C's working together. And what you're talking about is creating these pods, these opportunities for these conversations to occur.
Let me just get back before we go to the pod, something that you were saying that I think is very important. That is, if the leader can really embrace and encourage that leadership from their own people, so to speak, so that they begin to take on some of the roles and challenges that you were taking on as a leader, as you said, that can free the leader to move into new and higher ground. However, some leaders start getting competitive or getting fearful. Uh-oh, this person's going to take away my job, or this person's, they maybe they do know more than I do, or, I'm going to I'll be honest. I had a moment when you started, I can't remember what it was. You were putting it from a business perspective, and it was rich, some of the things you were sharing. I must say, I said, boy, Mark, you don't know about that stuff, And I was starting to feel, well, he's got his shit together, and you're. But isn't that human?
Yes, yes.
It's so human, and we have to acknowledge it and not be afraid to.
And I didn't understand that fact you were talking about until I was watching a YouTube. One of those influencers was saying the role of a trusted advisor is not just somebody you can go to get an ego boost or an emotional boost or say, I have your back. They're also ones who keep you honest. They're ones that show you, I don't want Mark to think bad of me. I want Mark to think well of me, so I better step up and do better. And it's competition on one side of the coin, and it's another thing that I have a relationship with Mark and I don't want to let him down. And this is something that we don't have to teach people. This is something that's built into us. Our physiology, our neurotransmitters actually give us rewards for this.
However, sometimes families trump healthy neurochemistry, and we got to
That's
remember
right.
that we've grown up in families that maybe did not discourage open communication, did not discourage, hey, you don't challenge daddy or mommy, you don't speak, you go along and be a good little family member. um, and that's that and civilization sometimes stifles individual voice. Being
Yeah.
civilized can
And
have its
I get a
drawbacks.
lot of feedback. I get a lot of feedback on my classes on just that fact. Tim, you're asking me to do something and they're going to make fun of me at work. And I'm only a lowly project manager. I can't do that. I have no influence. I'm not relevant. And you're asking me to move a mountain? And this is very troublesome for people. And the only thing I can offer them is hope. Number one, if you're a manager of something and you have a petri dish. Okay, you manage. You are responsible and accountable. This is something that you can experiment with and demonstrate this to yourself. Because if you don't see it in your own life, you're not going to build personal confidence and you're not going to experience it. And this is the weird thing. You don't just get trust from people, you get respect from people. And you only get respect once that you actually respect yourself. And this is the dynamic that actually gets the ball rolling. It doesn't happen in 1 or 3 years. It happens over 10 years. But you walk a different way in the office, or you are on a Zoom meeting in a different way. And then over 6 months to 3 years, all of a sudden people say, wow, there's something different here. And that's where people start asking you questions and start following you. This is a strange thing.
Let me just add a separate stream that's also important, because I absolutely agree. The more that you can become comfortable in your skin, and what do I mean by that? Really embracing both your strengths and your vulnerabilities, and not being ashamed of, some people are ashamed to talk about their strengths. oh, don't think so big of yourself, Mark. I
Right,
can hear
right,
my
right.
mother's voice, you know. Um, so it's not just sometimes our vulnerabilities that we're, you know, reluctant to let people see. We sometimes hold back on our strengths, you know. So another stream here is that while you're developing your individual integrity and skills and learning from trial and error, you also can build allies. You know, you don't have to totally move that mountain alone. You know what? There's probably one or two other people that, you know, are experiencing some of what you're experiencing. So we have to find them. And, you know, there's no doubt that in certain aspects of life, there is strength in numbers.
So this is a great segue. Okay. My thesis is, how do I help people actually understand and take advantage of personal progress? And how can I actually help communities progress? And I'm finding out that they're really tightly intertwined. I'm doing it from a functional systemic standpoint. You're doing it from an emotional, psychological standpoint, and we're coming
Small
to it
group
at the same
process
place. Now, I
standpoint.
found 5 facts that actually people can do and learn that are tactical to help them become unstuck. And it doesn't have, it takes advantage of emotions psychology, but it doesn't have to be that way. Um, Learning how to learn. We need to teach ourselves and teach others how to actually read quickly, and ingest and integrate knowledge. And we need to learn that. People are not taught, even though we go through university, it's so quick that we don't have time to really think about how to learn. And learning in the office place, how do I learn from my workers? How do I learn from my peers and my bosses? How do I find my purpose? You talked about passion. This is what's so fascinating about our conversations. Number 3, trusted advisors. Those are the people you're talking about, the people that you can go to and let your guard down. Number 4, finding your obstacle, finding something you can push, and then finding your people around you helping you push. And then,
Allies. Yeah.
yeah, and then solitude. I'm right now, I'm doing a lot of research on things like urban monasticism. There's a slow trend in people breaking off into small communities right now around the planet, which is really weird. And we're creating this. It's not isolation. It's actually people who are playing with a tinker toy called solitude. What happens if I go off and carve things in a safe way where I can think through really hard, complex things? For so long in our society, we've been busy, 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 busy. Do something out here, out here, out here, out here. And there's a whole real estate inside of ourselves. And you and I are actually doing this. And I have not shared this with you before, but you and I have been going down the same path. So there has to be a way of a meeting of minds where we can actually
Oh,
create
and
incredible
certainly as you
synergies.
were talking, you know, even that first step that you know, what first of the 5 principles. How do we learn to learn? That's certainly there's a great book by Carol Dweck, Stanford University professor, called Mindset. And she talks about the difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset is sort of like you're always looking over your shoulder. What, you know, if I make a mistake, what, you know, I'm going to be exposed, or, you know, this is, I, I, I like it when I get things quickly. And if I don't get it quickly, I want to go on to something else, or I want to walk away from the project. The growth mindset is when you almost learn from your mistakes and you keep working at it, and you step away but you come back and keep wanting to work on the idea, the problem. And it's that where it's developing that growth mindset that really strengthens inner confidence. You don't fall apart when you make a mistake. You understand it's part of the learning process. So both learning new tools for learning, as well as being aware of what that inner real estate, what kind of real estate you're carrying around. Have you let a lot of weeds just kind of grow on your property, or have you been, pruning and creating good soil for new ideas to be planted and new? So all these things, that's both an inner real estate as well as a template for learning that's different than perhaps you've been used to. So it's a real integrated approach. Inner and outer are really a seamless web.
Yes, this is the beautiful thing. Let's make a commitment here. Let's continue this conversation outside of the screens. And let's talk about how we can actually create an environment where we can start bringing in people to create that safe community where people can actually start experimenting with these and start playing with these and make mistakes outside of the office space and actually practice this. And let's figure out how we can do this in a manner that people who are workers can come back and start experimenting with their friends, and leaders who can come back and start experimenting with their friends and their workers. And so we can, number one, build up a little confidence in these skills. Number two, actually create a more trusting environment. Because if you have trust, you allow for more experimentation, and more experimentation means more revenue and more profit. And that's what companies need in the end. And if you and I can come up with an idea of what this looks like and how to create this safe community, let's see if people are interested in this, and let's see how much of an impact this can have on others' lives. I think this is one of the noblest causes anybody can work on right now.
And it's we've been talking about the isolation. I call it the loneliness of the long distance worker, and that is a good place to start. But the kind of community that we're talking about doesn't have to be just limited to long distance workers. It's all of us.
Right.
Finding that individual creativity, that's so important. How do you develop your purpose, your passion, your kind of quirkiness, your uniqueness? And then how do you bring it and share it and learn from others? So it's a continuous evolutionary learning process.
That's beautiful. Yeah, let's continue behind the
Sure.
scenes to have this conversation and start putting some meat onto this framework and see what we can do to actually create this, not just as an offering and not just as a business, but like you said, a purpose. There's an opportunity, and we know one fact, okay? We as a species have solved all the easy problems. Now we have a really bunch of difficult, complex problems, and they're going to get harder. Nature and life have a habit of making problems harder and harder and harder. And the more people are able to step up, and the more people are able to embrace progress, the more probability we have in actually being able to do things like go out to that quadrillion-dollar satellite and take advantage of its wealth. Explore the solar system, populate the galaxy, whatever it means. This is the only way we're going to do it.
Okay, let's go for it, Tim.
Thanks. Everyone, you're invited. Let's have a lot of fun with this. We're going to continue this. You're going to see a few more webinars. We're going to have an ongoing conversation between Mark, myself, and Kumar. And we're going to start sharing opportunities as well as support and training and discussion. If you have questions or comments on this, please participate and contribute, because this is not an individual effort. This is a community effort. We would invite all types of debate and conflict, because that's messy and that's wonderful and that's human. Thanks again for your time, Mark. Thank you,
No,
everybody.
it was a pleasure, Tim.
Yeah, it always is. It always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we'll have some more fun with this. Okay. Thanks again, guys. We will be talking next Tuesday, and we'll keep you updated on our status as well. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day, Mark.